Hello, everyone. My name is Hervé Aniglo, and my teammates and I did research on ExxonMobil. My teammates were Amaj Ahmed, Kobe Hunter Baron, Alejandro Garcia, and Anshuman Chakraborty. ExxonMobil is number one on the top 10 list of Fortune 500 companies. And ExxonMobil was first created in 1999 after the merger of two companies, Exxon and Mobil. Exxon was the world's largest energy company at the time, and Mobil was the second largest oil and gas company at that time. The merger costed $73.7 billion, and it was approved by the European Commission and the United States Federal Trade Commission. This was the largest corporate merger at the time. ExxonMobil is headquartered in Irving, Texas, and the primary brands of ExxonMobil are ExxonMobil Esso and ExxonMobil Chemical. Yeah. ExxonMobil is one of the world's largest companies by revenue and is one of the largest of the world's big oil companies. Now, throughout its career, ExxonMobil has been criticized for a, a variety of things, such as accusations of supporting climate change and global warming, and and allegations of burning fossil fuels. It also has dealt with political issues such as lobbying lawmakers and improperly dealing with human rights issues.
Hi everyone, my name is Alejandro Garcia, and I will be talking about how oil prices and oil reserves play a major role for Exxon and the world economy. Before getting into the content, I just want to provide a general overview of what oil is. Oil is a natural resource formed by the decay of organic matter over millions of years, and like many other natural resources, oil cannot be produced and can only be extracted where it already exists. Since we use it faster than it's being created, oil is considered a non-renewable resource. Unlike any other natural resource, oil is the lifeblood of the global economy and Exxon as well. The price of oil has a direct impact to Exxon's profitability, but more importantly, the price of oil and gas is the primary factor in deciding whether a reserve is economically feasible. As you can see in the graph, the price of oil has been quite volatile. The volatility in oil over the past decade has created plenty of concern for business people, national governments, global policymakers, and of course Exxon. With so much uncertainty in pricing, coupled with the environmental concerns as the world's appetite for fossil fuel grows, the main question arises. Are there enough petroleum oil reserves in the world to satisfy the growing demand? In order to shed more light into a somewhat ambiguous subject, I have profiled the 10 countries with the largest oil reserves in the next slide. In this slide, I would like to cover two large topics. The first topic is these 10 countries are home to the largest reserves and control the world's oil. The countries on this list span over 5 different continents. The world derives over a third of its total energy production from oil, more than any other source by far. As a result, the countries that control the world's oil reserves often have a disproportionate geopolitical and economic power. How does this relate to Exxon's strategy? Well, since Exxon is a global company, it has operations in 38 countries across the world and has created strategic alliances with some of the top oil-rich countries you see on that chart. One can assume Exxon created these alliances in order to feed the growing demand for oil. The U.S. consumes more oil than any other country, despite ranking 10th in the world in proven oil reserves. And also, Exxon wants to ensure they have an abundant source of oil for its business. Another important point I want to mention is that Exxon has used a diversification strategy by sourcing its oil over many different continents. This is extremely important because if there is a shortage in one area, or let's assume a region has suffered a catastrophe, the company has plenty of other sources to continue its operations. My second main topic I want to cover is oil reserve depletion. As of 2018, there were 1.73 trillion barrels of oil in the world. That means based on the current supply and demand projections, there is enough oil to last another 50 years, since the world uses 95 million barrels per day. If you think about globalization and the continued growth we're experiencing, not just in the US but in China and everywhere else in the world, 50 years does not seem that long from now. Also, what if the projections are wrong and it's not 50 years but it's sooner? That is a real threat to Exxon's business model and its long-term sustainability. Exxon's oil reserves by product are shown below. I will be speaking specifically on natural gas because it is the most common product we're familiar with and the most critical. Natural gas is used as a source of energy for heating, cooking, and is mainly used to fuel our vehicles. As you can see on the chart, Exxon's natural gas reserves have been declining every year, and this is a cause of concern. The cumulative reserve life, which is the number of years Exxon can sustain its current production levels with the existing reserves, is 17 years. This is the lowest level Exxon has seen in the past 20 years and will certainly create problems for the company in the long run. The three main factors contributing to the decline in reserves include oil reserve depletion. Because demand is vastly outpacing supply, the oil reserves are being drained. This has caused many countries to put quotas on the amount of oil that can be extracted. Secondly, there is a heavy cost associated with oil drilling. Therefore, Exxon has scaled back on these operations over the last couple of years to save on money. Drilling is a large capital expenditure for the company, and if it can reduce the amount of cash being spent, it can ultimately improve its cash flow. Last, oil drilling has a direct impact on the environment. The burning of fossil fuels like oil emits large amounts of carbon dioxide into the air that contributes to global warming. Okay, shifting gears, we see Exxon's unfair labor practices as another strategic issue for the company. Exxon has a poor track record involving labor practices where many are claiming the company has unfairly treated its union workers or has been involved with illegal activities or wrongdoing. Union workers represent a large portion of Exxon's work population, and many of the union workers are part of the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers International Union that has roughly 30,000 members. Many large companies like Exxon are not too keen on the union workers because unions have been known to slow down the work process, lessen overall productivity, and they also create a more poor employee relation with the company. But more importantly, unionism usually creates more costs for the company as workers demand more pay than non-union workers. Exxon has been accused of trying to diffuse union activities with the ultimate goal of getting rid of them. In some cases, there have been reports that Exxon only hires relatives of employees who are anti-union. Recently, union workers in a New Jersey facility went on strike because they had been working without a contract for over a year. In addition, the union workers claimed Exxon changed the terms of the conditions of their employment without notifying the union, bypassing union leaders, and lastly, they promised to grant employees parental paid time off if they withdrew from the union. Another more recent example is union workers in Australia had a huge win when they finally ended a 742-day strike against Exxon. The protest, which is one of the longest in modern Australian history, began on June 22, 2017, when roughly 200 maintenance workers at Exxon's Mobil subsidiary in Longford refused to accept the new contract. That new contract slashed wages by 40%. It proposed grueling anti-family shifts and left workers unpaid if they had to stop work due to technical problems. The contract was devised and had been signed by 5 people thousands of miles away in Western Australia without any knowledge of the local workers or union. These are only a couple of examples of the bad practices Exxon is accused of doing. If Exxon is truly committed to being a corporate citizen, they will make necessary changes to their HR and employee relation practices. In summary, Exxon should continue to invest in renewable green technology as consumer preferences are changing, and also to reduce its impact on the environment. Lastly, Exxon should also promote a healthier work-life balance, provide better wages, and offer career developmental opportunities to its union employees.
Fracking is currently a major focus within Exxon's business strategy. The company plans to increase fracking in the Permian Basin to 1 million oil equivalent barrels per day by 2024. This is in conjunction with Chevron, which plans to increase output to 900,000 barrels daily within the same timeline. The principal reason behind this push is to secure more sources of oil and increase output. An advantage that Exxon has in this endeavor is that they have the capital to drive out smaller competitors and reduce the threat of new entrants. This is primarily due to the cost involved with fracking. The estimated break-even point for fracking is approximately $50. Given the current price per barrel at $65.18, Exxon should be turning a profit from the operation. However, reports indicate that Exxon, as well as other top companies such as Chevron, have failed to make a profit from fracking. The fracking operation poses a threat to Exxon due to economies of scale. Although the company wishes to increase production, it may not be able to do so in order to yield a profitable return. Another factor involved in this is the low cost of natural gas, which acts as an alternative source of energy. With the increase in fracking comes the increase in not just oil, but of natural gas production as well. The drive to produce more oil from shale is a catch-22 scenario for Exxon. The cost of natural gas has become increasingly lowered by the supply surplus in the market. The average residential price for natural gas, measured in dollars per thousand cubic feet, the most recent price in May was $12.86. Although this price is elevated compared to the previous 3 months, it is 6% lower year over year. Given that the value of natural gas has decreased for 3 years, it is probable that the cost will continue to go down as production increases. The low cost of natural gas means the demand for oil falls, thus exacerbating the profit issue associated with extraction and economies of scale. Exxon is not sitting idly by while they struggle to produce profits. In a bold and untested move, the company is partnering with Microsoft to utilize their Azure service, which provides an access to an integrated cloud environment that securely and reliably collects real-time data from oilfield assets spanning hundreds of miles. If this technology works as intended, it will allow Exxon to more quickly map drilling data throughout the Permian Basin, which will enable them to make better strategic decisions. In doing so, Exxon will have the advantage of becoming a first mover in the industry with the technology. In implementing the technology first, the company will better understand and utilize the capabilities of Azure and possibly work with Microsoft to create changes within the cloud to better support Exxon's needs. A technological leadership strategy does not come without obstacles, however. In being the first to use the technology for such a project, Exxon will have to develop an understanding and method of application, which will require a learning curve period. Other companies such as Chevron may be able to capitalize on Exxon's first mover initiative to discern their mistakes and save time and money by avoiding them. The Permian Basin covers a 9.5 billion oil equivalent barrel resource base across more than 1.6 million acres. Exxon's usage of Azure across such an expansive area represents the industry's largest application of cloud technology. There are a number of environmental issues which come from fracking that go beyond cost. Over the company's history, Exxon has been responsible for a number of environmental disasters. In today's climate, there is a growing social awareness of the impact humans are having on the planet's climate. With this comes a greater understanding of where sources of environmental damage are coming from, and fracking has been cited as one such source. In order to collect oil and natural gas from shale, Exxon must pump a mixture of water, sand, and chemicals into the ground to allow the oil and natural gas to escape. This process has the potential to cause local water tables to be contaminated with the chemicals used in the process. In Wyoming, people residing within a natural gas basin complained of a bad taste and smell in their drinking water. An investigation was launched by the EPA, and it was discovered that people's water wells were contaminated with fracking waste. The drive towards cleaner energy has pushed the usage of cleaner burning natural gas, and as Exxon works to make fracking economically viable, the threat of environmental damage occurring directly impacts the cost leadership business strategy. In addition to this, because fracking requires the usage of water, research has shown that water sources near fracking sites are being depleted. Exxon's siphoning of water from local sources could have substantial impacts on both the environment and businesses within the region. The cattle industry, for example, in the region of Texas where the Permian Basin is located, could suffer large financial losses as livestock has no fresh sources of water. Of the nearly 400,000 oil and gas wells drilled since 2011, 3/4 were located in areas where water is scarce, and 55% were in areas experiencing drought. Fracking those wells used 97 billion gallons of water. Although there is no direct cost that can be currently linked to these environmental impacts, there is undoubtedly the potential for Exxon to be held liable for damages. Oil producers face a difficult crossroads. The cost of wind and solar energy is falling along with the increase in efficiency in these methods of energy capture. At the same time, companies such as Exxon are striving to secure more sources of oil while also increasing production. The price per barrel of crude oil fluctuates daily, and the forecast for the cost of oil is equally unpredictable. The cost of crude oil has fallen by 9% from 2018 to 2019. Global demand for oil is projected to decrease as the economic outlook declines internationally. Normally, supply and demand would dictate both cost and production, but with oil, the global demand does not dictate supply. The reason for this is that the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, otherwise known as OPEC, has not cut production despite a slump in demand. OPEC has traditionally dictated crude oil prices through output by carefully controlling the availability of oil in the market. This led companies such as Exxon to push for greater domestic sources of oil to combat dependency on foreign sources. Thanks to increased U.S. supply, demand for OPEC oil fell from 30 million barrels per day in 2014 to 29 billion per day in 2015. Rather than lose market share, OPEC kept its production target at 30 million barrels per day instead of cutting. This caused 2016 U.S. oil production to fall to 8.9 million barrels per day, which directly impacts Exxon's fracking operation due to the high cost involved. Economies of scale struggle to function under complex conditions such as these. The following are recommendations for ExxonMobil to combat the issues facing the company with regards to fracking and crude oil cost. Exxon should evaluate the cost savings of utilizing the Azure cloud platform, and if it is not yielding a positive return, the company should look to downsize its fracking initiative. The ability of OPEC to hamstring domestic production and reduce costs means that fracking will continue to have difficulties turning a profit. The company should instead invest in renewable sources of energy which are not dictated by the same market threats as oil. This will also have the impact of improving their environmental footprint and mitigating any potential damage payout that could result from it in subsequent years. With Exxon's broad reach and deep pockets, the company could be a technological leader within the renewable energy sector and help to dictate policy in their favor. Renewables would allow them to more effectively capitalize on economies of scale where the market could function more naturally and not be artificially influenced by sources such as OPEC.
Altogether, the oil and gas industry has made some contributions to climate change, but as you may know, they have not been positive contributions. And as a result of that, the oil and gas industry is looking to reducing its environmental impact and counter climate change. Um, and some of the factors that contribute to climate change that are caused by the oil and gas industry are the use of fossil fuels and having a fossil fuel-based business model. This is a large factor in the recent climate change implications, and the giants of the oil industry, including Exxon, are very slow to shift. And the reason why fossil fuels are a big contributor to climate change is because of the methane emissions that are gases that escape when fossil fuels are extracted and transported by oil organizations. Um, so with that, Exxon faces a environmental opportunity by looking towards a change in an energy solution. Most of the other giants and other corporations within the industry are spending investments on fossil fuel production. However, these organizations are looking to continue doing it in the same way and doing their business model in the same way, which does not make any kind of impact to climate change altogether and does not change the trend that it's going towards as of right now. So, since other organizations aren't looking to shift their strategy, Exxon has the opportunity to become more environmentally friendly and stand out amongst the group of organizations that exist today, and potentially increase their social standing with consumers, and potentially discover a more efficient method of operations, which they have been making some progress towards, which I'll get into in the next few slides. Um, and one kind of indicator of their shift of mindset is the decision for them to join the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, the OGCI, which funds initiatives to reduce emissions. And although this is a internally produced decision by Exxon, and this is an initiative that they're pushing towards on their own, it's pretty clear that external sources are also forcing them to change their ways, where investment funds are requiring companies to now explain how climate change affects their businesses, affects their value, and what they're looking to do to reduce their emissions altogether. So with Exxon's decision to join the OGCI, it's apparent that they're making more of an effort to, combat climate change. But what has their plan been in the past, and what is their plan going forward to essentially shift this contribution to climate change towards a lower trend and be more energy efficient and be more environmentally friendly? So looking to their past, we can see that they've spent 4 decades on investing into climate science research with academic institutions and governments. They've invested over $9 billion into developing lower emission energy solutions since the year 2000 to shift from fossil fuel usage. And so while the ambition for a change is present in their climate change statement, they've failed to present evidence in their yearly risk reports. So, for example, their 2019 report mirrored much of what was present in their 2018 report, which shows that they're not making much of an effort into providing insight as to the changes in the developments that they've made in the past year. The climate report for this year left out the climate reports that were developed by the UN and federal agencies. They've clearly stated that they don't believe that the world will meet the Paris Climate Agreement's global temperature goals, and as a result of that, they won't passionately pursue a reduction in fossil fuel marketing. In addition to that, they're still continuing to highlight R&D efforts of low carbon emissions, but they double back and they highlight that they doubt the effectiveness of the effort. And to quote, the statement says, however, the International Energy Agency in 2018 estimated in its Tracking Clean Energy Progress analysis that only 4 of 37 technologies are on track to help enable reaching the Paris Climate Agreement goals. So all of that kind of tells that Exxon is making some kind of effort, but they're not very they don't believe the world will essentially meet the goals that we've set for ourselves within the Paris Agreement. And as a result of that, they won't be putting too much effort on their end as well, which isn't a good look overall for the organization. In addition to that, there was a smear campaign during 2015 called #ExxonNew, and this campaign claimed that Exxon has been aware of the fossil fuel implications for years, and they have done nothing to prevent themselves from contributing to climate change and move forward with their daily tasks by the use of fossil fuels. So this campaign was created by environmental activists and lawyers in 2012, stating that ExxonMobil was aware of the implications of man-made emissions in the 70s and 80s. An investigation began in 2015 by New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman to fully understand the knowledge that ExxonMobil held during that time period regarding emissions. In 2018, a New York Times investigative piece was published that put an effective end to ExxonNew by stating that essentially everyone knew of the man-made emission implications to climate change, and it wasn't just siloed to Exxon. Exxon didn't hold this information themselves and say that they are aware of it, but they wanted to continue doing the things the way they do. But in fact, everyone knew at that time, and even the U.S. government was a part of that, since they knew of the carbon dioxide emission implications when Roger Revelle, who was the Kennedy administration advisor, established the Manuel Loa Carbon Dioxide Act, which worked to reduce emissions. Regardless, the public perception of ExxonMobil has been temporarily stained by these claims, even though they aren't 100% credible. And as a result of that, the organization will need to provide substantial proof that it is looking to reduce climate change and not just speaking words to keep the public happy. With all that being said, has Exxon made any kind of real evidence to committing to the reduction of climate change contributions? Well, with their recent 12-year agreement with Denmark's Ørsted AS for wind and solar power, the signs are pointing to yes. Exxon is looking to essentially put its money where its mouth is by entering this agreement for renewable energy use. This agreement is to specifically purchase 500 megawatts of wind and solar power, which is the first signed contract by any oil company, which again puts Exxon in a good position to have this environmental opportunity to be the first organization to make real commitments to reducing climate change. However, does this fix everything? Does this recent agreement really put them on the map of organizations looking to reduce climate change contributions? The answer is yes and no. This is an encouraging step forward for the organization in reducing climate change and making amendments to its overall image, but more work is required to make a lasting impact. Exxon is continuing to produce oil and natural gas to meet global energy demand while concurrently investing in renewable energy, which slightly defeats the purpose. They're working kind of on both sides at this point by continuing their regular business model, but also trying to make a change in their existing model and invest in renewable energy. So as a recommendation, I believe Exxon will need to look towards significantly reducing emissions in both the near and long term to make a positive impact. Otherwise, your contribution to climate change will continue to pose risks to the world. So altogether, Exxon is making changes to the climate change contributions, but more work is needed overall. And this new contract and this new agreement with Denmark's AS is a positive sign for the future.
Hello all, I'm Angshuman. I'll be taking you to the next section, which is competitions ExxonMobil faces and its financial issues. So here's the overall slide for about ExxonMobil competitors, starting with Shell's, ConocoPhillips, British Petroleum, and Chevron, and I have outlined their financial structure. So you can see mostly it's a Shell who is the tough competitor to ExxonMobil. Though Exxon is a integrated company and Shell is a group of company, still it's a tough competition to them. Um, Here's the bottom of the slides. I have a recent data. It says the total revenue of ExxonMobil 2019, it was actually decreased by 5.79%, despite revenue increase by most of its competitor. It's average 2.1%. Adding to the last slides where I talked about the decreased revenue, for the last 4 quarters, ExxonMobil was actually ranked third and among the top 10 competitors. Well, the top 10 competitors on average revenue was around 150 billion. Well, ExxonMobil has total decrease in 13.4%, which is significant. And when we talk about that, from 2018 to 2019, the revenue decreased from around 73 billion to 63 billion. Here, ExxonMobil actually facing numbers of challenges, including some investigation going on its accounting and tax practice, some lawsuit it faces by cities and some states also seeking fund to pay the effort of the climate change. One of my friend, our team member, discussed about the climate change as well. But what's the biggest problem of this 149-year-old company is that it's not making as much money as it used to be. That's what I pointed out here. Right side I have the stock price from 2018 to 2008 to 2018. It's you can see the trend is gradually it's decreasing. So main reason is the oil price, as you all know, and another is the tough competition it's facing. And again, the third point I mentioned is it's little different than being an oil company. Consumers changing their behavior from to online channel. That could be a threat to the existing physical infrastructure driven supply chain model. And of course, it's an era of innovation. Being an oil company, it is a little tough to have a regular supply of innovative product. Here is my next and final slide on competition. I talked about that service provider well equipped with the team up with the national oil companies. What does mean that the oil majors are disintermediating. So the next point is I took it from the statement from the CEO and chairman is that it says that technologies will play the ultimate role for all their challenges, which does mean that when you talk about energy, is the ultimate goal to have more and high energy, but at the cost of very low price. And other thing involved like less carbon footprint, sustainability, all those things, and these can achieve using more innovative technology, more innovation. So Exxon might want to invest more into that. No, Exxon is number one now in the top 500 companies, but being number one, there are some issues which number two and onwards don't have, is to retain their main position. To have that innovation is the only way. The next point is US exit from Norwegian continental shelf. Now, because of this exit, there's less supply of oil. But though ExxonMobil don't sold all of their region there, but still they hold 20% of stack. Uh, but one of the statement, their chairman said that it's only 3% was, so they're more focusing on the in-house oil supply. Next slide, I'll talk about Permian oil basin. but that's their main focus, and that was my recommendation also, because those are the outside the country is kind of investment, maybe long term, but this um, in-house Permian basin could help them to gain some short-term goals. And the last, not the least, is the diversification. Now, Exxon is an oil company, but today's world there are a lot of electric vehicles coming up, so that kind of impact their performance. So they may think of have more diverse business to that can help even the electric vehicle. That's my suggestion to ExxonMobil can think of. Next, I'll talk about the financial aspect or issues ExxonMobil is facing. The first one is very interesting. I found in the internet is a farming basin problem. Now this is a in-house basin which produce a good amount of oil, but the problem is that this basin is producing more than it's expected, which actually impacted the oil price. And because it's more production, Exxon is invested a lot of money to it, around $2 billion in the last year, 2018. So obviously it's huge investment, but as I talked about the financial earning or revenue, it actually decreased from last year around 13%. So that may be a long-term problem to them. Now the other point I discuss is the dividend. We all know Exxon is the dividend giant, but if we talk about high dividend, we can remember about the General Electric company. Is a good reminder that dividends are paid out of free cash flow and it's not earning. So that one thing ExxonMobil should think of for their to meet their long-term goal. Next, here I shows some financial record from ExxonMobil last quarter financial data with the 0.77 current ratio that indicates that the company may have difficulty meeting its current obligation, which is in bad shape. Next, I discuss about some low oil price. What is actually it's already mentioned earlier. The low oil price makes it harder to justify their long-term commitment as well. So in any case, they have some short-term problem and the long-term issues to raise their capital. So what they need to do, as my recommendation is, they need to find some alternative to promote their earning or they may plan to cut short some of their capital expenditure. Here is some very recent news I came across about tech ExxonMobil. The first one is very recent, which says that they have the Texas location got fire on 31st July, and then the same location have a similar incident on March 16 and June 6. So this is very serious problem, and they need to take care of more safety and precaution in their locations. The next one is in the interesting research on global top 500 company for the last 1 year. It says that overall share price of oil and natural gas company had lost around 1.33%, and when the oil and energy sector lost 3.2% on average share, wherein other top 500 company gained 4% in their share. The main reason I think again is the low oil price, and that we can blame for this. In my last slides, I'll discuss about some recommendation I have for ExxonMobil for their current issues. The first one is they need to invest more in research and development to help them be technologically advanced. I think similar recommendation made by one of my team member when discuss about the fracking issue as well. And then the next one, add more priority on safety, and this I came up with my last slides where I talked about the recent incident for people's safety. The last but not least is the diversification. Uh, with the recent technological advancement, the people are have a tendency to move to electric car. So Exxon can think of to diversify their business to those areas as well.
ExxonMobil has faced a lot of political issues, such as spending nearly $9 million in 2016 in hopes of influencing its lawmakers. ExxonMobil has spent $8.8 million lobbying members of Congress and federal agencies. In 2008, the company also spent $29 million on lobbying. Interestingly, the oil and gas industry in 2016 spent $88.6 million in lobbying. Representatives from ExxonMobil also lobbied the Department of State. With all that being said, to certain individuals, this may come across as shady and unethical. However, at least in America, lobbying is considered legal. ExxonMobil just has to do what it has to do what it has to do in order to maintain its company and keep providing its services. For those of you who do not know, lobbying is to influence a politician or public official on an issue. And ExxonMobil has used lobbying for its personal gain, but it also backfired on them. For example, they were accused of knowing climate change, and however, they keep denying it. But it turns out that they knew about climate change for years. They did all that to protect its profits, and instead of doing something to prevent it from happening. This is also bad upon them as a business, and many people are starting to doubt its credibility. However, ExxonMobil is still thriving and still doing well, and it is here to stay. It is one of the biggest producers of oil and gas in the world, and just to think, what would happen if Exxon and Mobil didn't merge? Yes. So yeah. So even though the fossil fuel controversy with ExxonMobil is still at large, one cannot doubt that ExxonMobil has fueled a lot of people's car tanks, truck tanks, and so on. Even though, like most companies, they have done some unethical things and things that may seem wrong, at the end of the day, it's business, and they just have to do what they have to do in order to um, rise above his competitors. Thank you all for listening and viewing our PowerPoint presentation on ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil is number one on the list of Fortune 500 companies, but at the same time, it had its fair share of negative criticism and backlash from the public. My teammates and I have spent a lot of time and hours into researching more about ExxonMobil, and we were surprised on what we discovered. At the end of the day, it's business, and businesses need to do what it has to do in order to survive, thrive, and beat out its competitions. I would personally like to thank my team members, Anshuman Chakraborty, Aman Ahmed, Kobe Hunter Baram, and Alejandro Garcia for their contributions. And we would also like to thank Dr. Francis Fabian for assigning us this project. ExxonMobil is here to stay, and it seems that it is not going anywhere, not by a long shot. ExxonMobil has filled a lot of people's car tanks and truck tanks, and it is a very plentiful and bountiful company that, even though it has some allegations against it, it has done a lot of good for the world. Where will we be without ExxonMobil? Again, thank you all and have a very nice day.